Know your why. When you are sitting down to write, when you're spending all this time on a project, it is super important to know why you're doing it. Figuring out the motivation that gets you to do the writing is what you need to focus on, especially super early on in your career. If you are just like, this idea is cool, I'll try it out, I don't know if that'll work out for you. So what you should do is spend some time figuring out why you want to write stories. For me personally, it's because I want to share happiness and joy and emotions with others that I've felt from writing stories and reading stories. And so knowing your why is really important. Consistency is key when you are trying to become a writer. If you aren't consistently writing, then you won't get very far in your projects. Now, consistency is different for everybody. For me, consistency is 5 to 6 times a week. But for you, it could be just on the weekends when you have time available. Now, finding that consistency is really important because if you are working on your project a little bit at a time every single day or as consistent as possible, you will continue to grow that project into something more. You need to kill your darlings. If it does not help the story move on, or if it does not help the story in any way, cut it out. I don't care if it's the best scene you've ever written ever. If it does not suit the story, it needs to go. That's just because every scene needs to be integral to something. Whether it is to show a character's growth, everything needs to have some sort of conflict. So if this part of the story isn't helping your story at all, just because it's cool doesn't mean it needs to be there. So, kill your darlings. Know your audience. Whatever story, series, or whatever you're writing in, it's really good to know what the audience expects from that. Whether it's romantasy, that is super popular right now, people expect enemies to lovers, and that's totally okay. It's a cliche or a trope of the genre, but people want that. That's why they go to specific stories. So don't be afraid to follow those tropes and cliches. Don't lean on them too hard, but make them your own. Set up your writing space. Wherever it may be, it's really good to have an area that you can go and write. For me, I like having a desk that is clean and with good lighting that I can go to and not have to worry about the outside world. And so if you go to it, it's like you're going to a job, and it can kind of change your mindset and make it more focused. And so you're away from all those regular things. So set up your writing space. Write 10 words. With this trick, I really think you'll be able to surpass writer's block and just all the things that keep you from actually sitting down to write. If you just tell yourself, all I have to do today is just write 10 words. You sit down and you write those 10 words, and then you can keep going. The reason why is because you've already tricked yourself into actually sitting down to write. And those 10 words, it's really not that difficult. But you can make this for anything, 100 words, a paragraph, whatever it may be, that'll just get you sitting down and writing. Revise and revise again. Your first draft is not going to be good. Of course, there will be good things in that draft. That's where your story came from, and that's essentially where you're telling your story for yourself. But if you want the story to be good enough to share and to publish and to get published by somebody, you really need to revise it. Take some time away from it and then go back and just tear it up. Because once you do, you will see the flaws and also the parts where you can make it better. Be concise. Unless you are some super poetic author like Patrick Rothfuss, focus on writing the story as simple and as focused as possible. Of course, have your own voice within the story itself, but cut out unnecessary words and make the story what it needs to be. Don't fluff it up to try and hit that word count. Write the story how you want to write it, as focused as it will be, because readers really want the story. They want things to keep moving. Of course, scenes can be important, and describing that clothing may be important to the story, but if you don't need to, just be focused and concise with your writing. Understand grammar and punctuation. When you are starting to self-edit and really get into the further points of the publishing process, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing, you really should understand how to use commas, when to end a sentence, what a paragraph is. Because if you do, your self-editing will be way, way more focused and way better. If you don't understand any of those things, you're going to be paying an editor or be waiting to get your manuscript back for way longer because there were so many mistakes. So if you understand punctuation and grammar, your writing process will be way, way better. Start with the end in mind. If you are struggling to know where your story is going to go, stop whatever you're doing in the story and figure out what the end is going to be, and then work backwards. If you understand where you're going, it'll be way, way easier to get there in the long run. I know it may not sound fun, or you may not like to plot out your stories, but trust me, this will make your writing and everything so much better when you are working on your story. Focus on plot and characters. World building is super fun, but it's not as important as you may think. Even if you have the most generic medieval Western fantasy world, if your characters and plot are really intriguing, people won't care as much. There's a reason why people still keep writing these generic worlds and people still like the stories. It's because the characters are compelling and the plot that's around them is really intriguing. So, of course, build a world. Make sure it makes sense, at least to some degree. But don't spend all your time on that. Just make sure you have really good characters and you have solid plot. Use music effectively. Not just when you're writing, but also when you're creating characters. Make a playlist for a specific character or different scenes. That way you can put it on and just dive right back into where you were. Seek feedback. Constructive criticism is one of the most important parts when it comes to improving as a writer. Whether it's early on in your story, just talking about brainstorming ideas and what your story could be, or if it's late into the process when you have been creating this story for a while. Getting the help from other people is really important. Of course, if it's too off the mark or you really just don't like it, it's all on you as a storyteller to decide what criticism and what feedback you want to take. Try writing in different genres. Maybe you've been so focused on fantasy and the epicness of it that you forgot how to write really grounded characters in maybe a noir story. And so if you are struggling to really get your epic fantasy or whatever genre you write done, try something else. Even if it is just a short story, I think you'll be able to learn a lot more of your weaknesses and strengths and be able to improve as a writer. Enjoy the research process. When you are first starting out writing your story, it's really important to do as much research as possible. Only for a certain amount of time though. You don't want to spend too much time on the research and just not even get to your story. But make sure you have accurate information. Also, if you don't have the accurate information at the time, that's okay. Make a note and come back to it later. Stay organized. Whether it is Google Docs, a notebook, or whatever, keep a wiki with all of your information from your stories on it. That way you will not run out of any ideas, and when you do come to something where you're like, oh, I can't remember that part, you can go back, search it, find whatever it was, and continue on with your story. If you stay organized with all your notes, ideas, characters, I think it'll help you a lot. And always write down every single idea you have, even if it's in the middle of the night and you're really tired. Embrace challenges. There are so many times where we are reading a book or writing a story and we come across really difficult or complex ideas. That is okay. That's a part of the writing process. It is part of art. So instead of shying away from those difficult things, you should dive into them, and even if it's just for you personally, figure out what it means. Art stories are meant to bring us together, and life is difficult. And if you put that into your story, somebody who reads it will be able to understand a more difficult or a situation they have never been a part of. Take all of the notes possible. Whether it is just on the most insignificant part of your story, write it down. Everything in your story needs to have notes or just something written about it. That way you don't forget. Writing any story, even short stories or flash fiction, is a lot of work. You have to keep so many ideas in your head, so instead of just keeping them all up in your head, write them down. That way you will be able to just stay focused and know where your information is at. Reevaluate your goals. If you're writing a story and you come to a point where you just cannot write it anymore for whatever reason, take a step back and think, is this a story that you want to write? Is this the right story or the right direction for it? Do you need a new protagonist or a new point of view for this story? It is okay to take a break, even if you're on a deadline, because really what matters is making the story the best it can be. So, take a step back and reevaluate your goals and what the story should be. You need to develop a thick skin when it comes to criticism and feedback. Whether it's good-natured or not, people are going to give you their opinions on your stories. And they may not say it in the right way, or it may not come off as they think it will. So you need to be able to accept that and just think, hey, you know what? They gave me criticism. They took the time to read and be a part of my story, so I'll accept it. It may not be good or well thought out, but take it into consideration. And it's really not personal. I mean, of course, people can make it personal, but it shouldn't be personal. And so take it in stride and understand that they just want to read a good story. Read your work aloud. When you are typing away, getting the story out, it may sound amazing in your mind. And I'm sure it's a great story. But unless you are reading it out loud and hearing what it sounds like when you're reading it, the sentences, paragraphs, and overall story may not flow like you think it does. And so what you should do is after you've written a chapter or whenever you're just reevaluating your story and taking time away from it, read it out loud and see how it sounds. If it flows really well, awesome, you're doing great. But if it doesn't, maybe you need to reevaluate how you write your sentences. Writing is a skill. Writing is something that anybody can learn. We all have the innate desire to tell stories or at least talk about something. And we can all learn how to be better storytellers by practicing. So get all your bad words out now and just get it done. Stay true to your vision. A lot of times the first ideas and structures and thoughts of our story are the best. And we have so much emotion and drive to get that story out. So of course, feedback and editing and direction is really important. But stay true to your story, whatever it may be. Don't let other people tell you what your story is. Focus on what you want it to be and tell the best story you can. Master the art of storytelling. Whether it is character, plot, or setting, you need to understand what makes those things good. Figure out what story structure works for you and your story. Figure out what makes a really interesting character. And figure out what makes a setting good and unique. Whether it is just figuring out how to get the words on the paper, or how to make somebody cry or laugh or feel emotions, mastering storytelling will be one of the most important things that you will ever accomplish as a writer. Celebrate all of the small victories. Whether it is you sat down to write today, or you passed 10,000 words, or finished your whole book, celebrate that. You're doing something that's really difficult, that takes a lot of time, energy, and effort. And when you do something good, you should reward yourself. Enjoy it. You're doing fantastic. So keep up the good work, and remember, your story is amazing.
In life, when we feel threatened or scared, like when someone's aiming a Nerf gun at you from offset, you feel that urgency. You feel that desire to either fight or flight. And I feel like harnessing that is something that can grow your writing, and especially your action, your intensity.
Develop your voice as an author. Don't copy others and just think that you can make it your own. What you should do is learn from them, but mainly just write what you want to write. And over time, you'll be able to develop your own voice as an author. Use dialogue effectively. Don't put in a bunch of fluff and other things that will slow your story down. When you're writing dialogue, make sure it sounds like the character, it reveals different character traits about that character, and there's action, conflict, and keeps the story going. You don't want dialogue to sound stale or the same from every single character. Make sure that if you're having a conversation, it suits the story and pushes everything forward. No 0 days. Even if you don't have time to work on your story or project, No matter what, just open the document and write a sentence, a word, edit something. As long as you are doing something every single day to make sure you're working on your story, eventually you'll get it done and you'll get in the habit of actually writing the story. Take time to research and study successful authors, or just any author, because anybody that has published a book is very successful. Whether it is their style, their voice, or anything they do, look at what it is, find out what makes it unique, and try and apply that to yourself. Of course, don't copy them, but take what they do great and make it a tool that you can use in your work.